Thank you very much, Mr Acting Deputy President. As we all prepare in this place to return home and spend Christmas with our family and friends, I ask all of us in this chamber, and in fact all Australians, to consider the plight of over 6,200 younger Australians who will spend this Christmas living in an aged care facility and not at home with their loved ones, as we will be. A distressing situation which shockingly need not be this way. The facts are this. Today, over 6,200 younger Australians between 18 years of age and 65 live permanently in residential aged care homes. 46% of these residents are under the age of 59, and sadly, many are as young as 18 and in their 20s and 30s. In my own home state alone of Western Australia, there are more than 500 West Australians who are inappropriately housed in these facilities. Australia's aged care facilities, as good as many are designed to deliver the acute gerontology requirements of older Australians, with an average age today of over 85. These facilities are simply not designed or equipped to house long-term and support the very specific requirements of younger people who have and should have their whole lives ahead of them. While these facilities do provide basic shelter and care, they cannot and are not equipped to provide the individualised, multidisciplinary health rehabilitation support required for these younger Australians with complex requirements, and never mind providing them with the quality of life that all younger Australians should rightly aspire to. Research into the matter is very, very clear. Young people who live long-term in aged care facilities with the dead and dying experience declining emotional, physical and mental health, but none of us in this place really needed the research to tell us that. This is why I sponsored my first inquiry as a senator into the plight of younger Australians with physical and mental disabilities residing in aged care. This came about because two wonderful women, Bronwyn Morcombe, the National Director of the Young People in Nursing Homes National Alliance, and Dr Di Winkler from the Summer Foundation, separately brought this situation to my attention. Initially, I found it almost impossible to believe that as a nation we could possibly consign indefinitely so many of our young people indefinitely to residential aged care. But sadly, my research quickly demonstrated that this is in fact the situation in Australia. After the exhaustive national inquiry, in November 2014, the Senate inquiry reported back to the Senate in June 2015. The committee made a wide-ranging series of recommendations which it believed would provide an interim solution for the next few years as the NDIS rolled out nationally, to ensure that all of those who wanted and needed to relocate out of these aged care facilities could do so. And not only that, but also so that they could finally receive the health, rehabilitation and disability support that they so badly require, and also so that they can actually move out into the home of their choice, which is something that almost all other Australians take for granted. We have a choice about where we live and what we do with our lives, which sadly is denied to these 6,200 Australians. A stroke, a car accident, a degenerative disease. There, but for the grace of God, go any of us in this chamber and any of our family and friends. It is that simple. It could be any of us who find ourselves in this situation. But there's also a financial burden placed on young people and their families, because obviously many have children themselves and they've got extended family members who really find it very challenging to visit their mother, their father, or their brother and sister in such a facility. Young people in nursing homes, sadly, are subject to the same income and assets assessments relating to government assistance as the other elderly residents of aged care facilities. So this can mean that a young person today is up to $1,000 worth a fortnight, $1,000 worse off per fortnight than if they were already part of the NDIS. Sadly, some individuals also decide for them as a consequence that the only way forward is for them to divorce their partner. Others decide they have to sell their family home or because of their circumstances they lose their homes and their jobs and their family, which results, even if they can find a way to get themselves out of residential aged care, they have no home to return to, and consequently many end up living the rest of their lives in aged care. The NDIS was created to solve problems exactly like this, by better meeting the long-term requirements of people with disability, their families and also their carers. This government has already put an additional $10 billion per year into the scheme to support exactly groups of people like this. But despite this, young people in nursing homes are not yet being prioritised by state and territory governments into the NDIS rollout. I think this is a completely unacceptable situation, given that there are now enough places in the NDIS to allow all young people in aged care to enter the scheme now. The Summer Foundation's work with young people in nursing homes in New South Wales and in Victoria showed that 98% of the young people they worked with were eligible for the NDIS. Yet after 2 years of the NDIS being available in the trial sites, hardly any young people in aged care had yet entered into it. Today I've written to Ministers Porter and Ministers Prentice seeking a speedy government response to this inquiry, and also recommending an additional 5-point course of action on how to get these people out so they don't have to spend another Christmas next year living in residential aged care. So the first recommendation is that we've got to reduce the bureaucratic hurdles required to enter the NDIS. Again, they are very identifiable and they are eminently solvable. 2, we must also commit to young people in nursing homes being amongst the first participants in the NDIS rollout. Again, very doable. The positions are available. States and territories simply have to prioritise this particular group in their individual state and territories. 3, aged care providers must be better prepared to move their young residents into the NDIS, which can be done, I believe, through a campaign and provider workshops and series of information. Again, very doable, and we can do it now. 4thly, I believe that there needs to be a one-off initiative to fully connect all young people in nursing homes to the NDIS scheme, because again the evidence is that many of them are still largely unaware of the NDIS and their eligibility and how they actually access the scheme. Again, something that is eminently doable with the desire and the will to do it. 5thly and finally, I think the next step the government can and should do, the governments I should say at all levels, we've got to stop the pipeline of young Australians entering residential aged care, largely from hospitals or other facilities where they complete rehabilitation for things like acquired brain injuries, degenerative diseases, where there is simply at the state and territory level insufficient rehabilitation facilities, and the only option is residential aged care because they're not able to be taken care of for their medical requirements at home. Again, very, very solvable. But to stop this, we've got to stop people going in and intervene now to stop people going into residential aged care. Over the course of this inquiry and my advocacy in this area, I keep getting the feeling from federal and state departments that this is all too hard, and the easiest option for them is just to make everybody else, all these young people in Australia, just sit back and wait for another few years while the full rollout occurs. Well, I'm sorry, but it is not too hard, and it is simply the wrong thing to do. We know who these 6,200 Australians are. We know what their needs are. We know what needs to be done, and we know that over 98% will eventually be eligible anyway under the NDIS. Why should they have to wait for bureaucrats to get their act together? It is time for the NDIA, for the state and federal governments to act, to prioritise this very discreet and very needy group of Australians. I'll leave the Senate with this thought. What better present could we all provide than the certainty for these 6,200 younger Australians that they will not have to spend another Christmas in a nursing home? And this will certainly be my New Year's Eve wish this year, that we can work together to make this happen. Thank you very much, Mr. Acting Deputy.